I looked at him and I was pretty startled because I'd worked out there several years and never seen anything like this, never heard of anything like this. And I said, "Is this a UFO?" And he's smiling at me and he says, "I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that." What I knew he meant was it was, but he couldn't tell me. So I said, "What are you going to do with this information?" And he said, "Well, we always have to airbrush them out before we sell them to the public."
I was asked to go over to this facility on Langley Air Force Base where the NSA was bringing in the information from the lunar orbiter. And so I packed up some tools. I went over. I went into the facility. A couple of officers took me into this hangar. It was a very large hangar. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab and he said, "By the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon." And at that point I became frightened and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. If I compare it to what I'm seeing now, because I do have photographs that have artifacts in them that are similar to what I saw, they're massive.
And he said, "Well, we always have to airbrush them out before we sell them to the public."
Some of the structures are, half a mile in size. So they're huge structures. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. Some of them were round. Some of them looked like a Quonset hut, with a domed kind of, like a greenhouse. The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. I didn't want to look at it any longer than that because I felt that my life was in jeopardy. And I knew that young fellow who was sharing this was really, really overstepping his bounds at that point. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight.
Just an example here of how the pictures are manipulated. You'll notice that this little rock here, just at the bottom here, this little rock here, and this little rock here are identical, which is odd on the moon. You would expect them to be at least slightly different, but they're not. This whole section here is an exact duplicate of the section above it, minus this little bit. And coming over to the left here, we have another example. That rock and that rock are identical. Those are identical. That is identical. Okay, this is a 360-degree panoramic view of the Taurus-Littrow Valley, Apollo 17 landing site. So you could be reasonably certain that somewhere in this picture is the Apollo 17 lander. I can't find it. We know where it should be. It should be pretty well in the center here. But it's not. It's not anywhere there at all. It's not hidden anywhere because it's quite tall. We have an astronaut here, Jack Schmitt. We have the lunar rover here, but we don't have a lander. Note to set dresser, remember lander next time.
And a major intelligence organization, totally in disarray, new founded, didn't know what they were doing after World War II, and not really reorganized yet. And as a result of that, the President Truman at that time convened a very high-level committee to examine this alien or UFO phenomenon. They did come to the conclusion that it was alien, and the military rightly came to the conclusion, if they're hostile, there's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, their choice was to deny it and to hush it up and create the National Security Act of 1947, which validated that deception and covered it up and allowed the group to go underground, as it were. And we've been living with that now for 50 years. It is really the beginning of the whole cover-up, the entire denial of this phenomenon.